Hello, and welcome back to the third and last day of the public program of the Diasporic Schools. The Diasporic Schools is a project initiated by Kingston Festival des Arts in Brussels. With Diasporic Schools, our festival commissioned and presented five new artistic projects during the whole month of October. Projects by Bushra Khabili, Christian Ampeta, Yael Batana, Samah Jawi and Rim Chile, and Otobong Nkanga and Sandrine Honliasso, who are our guests of the hour. Please visit the website of the festival, www.kfda.be, to find documentation and more information on art in each of the projects as well as on the whole public program. The urgency of this project emerged from the reflection that, far from being new, remote transmission, communication, and cultural exchange has always existed. Inside diasporic communities, where methods have been developed in the sharing and contents of practicing care in conditions of impossibility of physical proximity. In this time of pandemic, the diasporic schools do not only acknowledge the learning in diaspora, but the learning from it. It's an honor for me to introduce Sandrine Honliasso and Otobong Nkanga's talk with Diana Campbell Betancourt. As over the month of October, I have thoroughly enjoyed the episodes of Otobong and Sandrine's new podcast, Eco, which was started in the frame of the diasporic schools and will continue to be produced and released beyond the diasporic schools. I'm also glad to announce that the last episode within the frame of the diasporic schools was released this afternoon and that you can go and listen to it on ecoflow.com. Before I give them the floor to discuss the origin and the content of the projects with Diana, please allow me to introduce Otobong and Sandrine first, and also Diana a bit more. So Otobong Nkanga is a Nigerian-born artist who began her art studies at the Obafemi Awolowo University in Ile-Ife, Nigeria, and later continued her studies in Paris at the École Nationale Supérieure des Beaux-Arts. In her practice, she interweaves media such as installation, textile performance, painting, drawing, text, and stories to create multisensory encounters. Kanga's work is often based on intensive research, teasing out the intersections between objects and actions and the relationship between care and repair. By exploring the notion of land as a piece of non-belonging, she provides an alternative meaning to the social ideas of the identity, and she lays out the inherent complexity of resources like soil and earth and their potential values in order to provoke narratives and stories connected to land. Kanga has exhibited widely in exhibitions around the world, including Documenta 14, Biennale di Venezia, Sharjah Biennale, as well as solo presentations at Museum of Contemporary Art, Chicago Tate Modern. Sandrine Honliasso is an independent curator and critic. She has worked as an assistant in production and mediation at the Fondation Cadiste in Paris and as a communication officer at the Institut d'Art Contemporain of Villeurbanne. She is the author of Monologue, a digital space dedicated to contemporary artistic creation. She was co-curator of the exhibition Germination in 2018 in Dakar. Finally, our moderator, Diana Campbell Betancourt, is an American curator now based between Brussels and Dakar. Since 2013, she has served as a founding artistic director of the Samdani Art Foundation and chief curator of the Dakar Art Summit. By bringing together artists, architects, curators, and writers from South Asia, Campbell transformed the latter into a leading platform for research and exhibitions. She has also curated exhibitions for and worked with artists such as Bruce Corner, Powell Altamer, Chian Dairit, Isabel and Alfredo Aquilzan, and others. Her writing can be found in Mus, Frieze, Art in America, the Museum of Modern Arts, and other publications. Before they start the conversation, I would like to invite the audience to actually already write their questions and remark in the comments, whether you're watching us on Facebook or in the live chat if you're watching us on YouTube, so that we can be reading them during the live, and also we can collect them before the Q&A at the end of the session. And I would also like to remind everybody that after this conversation, we're going to take a short break, and that at 7:30 we're going to have a live screening and of filmmaker Miko Revereza's work, a section of his work, and he's going to go in conversation with Daniel Bongagubai and comment the different films. Thank you for being here again, and I will now leave the floor to Sandrine, Otobong, and Diane.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So it's a pleasure to, be here in conversation with two wonderful people who I know separately, and it's so wonderful to see them coming together. I guess to start, what I think is really interesting about this Diasporic Schools initiative of the Kunsten Festival des Arts and also of Otobong's practice is this idea of expanding horizons and shifting perception. So when Daniel and I were discussing this program, it's interesting that people who are a member or are part of a diaspora have always been connecting digitally or remotely because you are away from home. And rather than seeing this as a limitation, how do we use these ways of being in a productive way for now? And I'm very moved by that. Otobong and Eco, and it's about finding new vocabularies, new terms of expression, and new terms of comparison, and constellations that are based on ideas and values and not necessarily geography. I like this term that we're all interconnected and inseparable. And I also love this idea that's described in the Eco kind of blurb about creating an elastic space. And what's beautiful about this podcast that Sandrine and Otobong will tell you about more is they've created this elastic space that's connecting Africa, Japan, Bangladesh, really diverse contexts, but via materials and parts of the land that are circulating through the way we live our daily life. I guess another thought is that echoes of conversation of the past build upon each other and carry forward in future conversations. And unlike writing, conversation to me is an additive process. You can't really erase what you said in conversation because you can't control the memory of the other person you're conversing with. So it's not like when you're editing a text and you can delete things, but you can build on what you said, go back to what you said and revise it in an ongoing conversation. So I guess following this line, conversation is a core part of Otobong's practice. And she treats conversation as a core concern that materializes the immaterial and provides a structure for conversations to arise. So I guess my first question for you guys is, how did this conversation between you, Sandrine, as curator, and Otobong as artist develop? And what was the process that led to giving these sets of conversations a name and a structure like Eco?
Do you want to go? Should I go?
I think it's good you go.
Okay. Well, when Otobong talked to me about this idea of the podcast, I was very much seduced and enthusiastic by this project because as curator and most generally someone interested in how societies function and how individuals within societies behave and trying to understand what we do, the things we do and how we do them, having conversation in my practice with artists, curators or researchers that inform the work that artists do or inform my own thinking is very much part of my practice. And that idea of, that practice of talking with those people that really much define and influence the way I think was my first way of engaging with the art world. A few years ago, I started this website called Le Monologue, which Eric talked about in the introduction. And this platform, this website, we can call it a blog or whatever, is a place where I would publish reviews, but also interviews that I conduct with artists or other person working in the cultural field. So it really makes sense for me when Otobong suggested that idea of the podcast, because it was very much something that I was already doing and I really care about, because it allows a better understanding of one's practice and it allows to dig furthermore in what they do. And I was very much interested also in the podcast because, as you said, Diana, it's very much different from an interview that you would read on a magazine or on a website. The fact that it's vocal, it allows to access the emotions, the feelings of the person, of the people talking. It also, something that I like about the podcast is also something that one can share with others because it's vocal, and then you can you can listen to a podcast with other person, while reading is much more, although we can have like collegial readings, it's much more something that someone do by oneself. And I like the idea that the podcast could be shared among other person. And also, as you said, it's very much, the podcast is probably more truthful to the conversation that happen between 2 person or 3 person, depending on how many you are. And I like the fact that it really much restitute better than the writing, things that have been said, emotion connected to those things. And the vocal also allows a proximity, another kind of proximity with the people talking. So yeah, I was very much interested in that proposition that Otobong made me. And in terms of like building the podcast and thinking about how we would run, we would invite, since the podcast is conceived in the framework of Carve to Flow, the ongoing project of Otobong, it was very much important for us that the guests, as much as the ecozone relate to the values and the ideas that are built, that Carve to Flow is built upon. So ideas about how we relate to land, how bodies and land connect and inform the social and the economic sphere of our lives. And since it's also Carve to Flow is also built upon this idea of connecting people and building collaboration from people operating in different fields, and also, how would you say, connect people and also build upon this relationship. It was important for us to invite people that we have met, to invite people whose work and activities has really much impact our work, our reflection, and the way we conduct ourselves in the work. So yeah, we wanted to, us personally, expand on our relationship and our understanding of these people activities and thinking, but also share with the audience that the way they impacted our thinking and activity, I would say.
Yeah, so maybe it's good to continue from that and just to say, thank you for the invitation. And when I got this invitation in June, and I was asked, it's something, there's one way you're thinking about how do you connect with the kinds of people you're working with? How do you create a platform that allows to hear the voices of other people that you're working with? And so, Sandrine, we met in Dakar, in Senegal, and
We did.
yeah, and also Anna, you met Sandrine in Senegal too, in the Cura program with Raw Academy at Koyo, the space, the academy that Koyo had founded and has founded. So in a way, it was interesting to be able to continue working with certain people that I felt that they have a particular impact and a particular position in relation to what they do. And it made sense to work with Sandrine because after being there with 3 months with Sandrine, it made sense to see how she works and to continue that in a project. So I had asked Sandrine last year to be able to work that we could work together with Carve to Flow. And when I was invited to do the podcast, it just kind of fitted naturally from her work and my work to find a way in which we put the people that we thought were important to the kinds of ways we work together. So that's how the thinking through of the podcast started and then we came to this point.
And maybe for those people who haven't experienced the podcast yet, they're really great. Check them out. But maybe you guys can go into, the name ECO and the BBO meaning of that, and also what that means for how you think we should be sharing knowledge today.
Yeah, the the name ECO was I think maybe it was one of our great challenges about the podcast. It was really hard. It took us like a very long time. And well, we wanted something that would express the format of this proposition, so a podcast, something related to sound, voices, music, but also something that would express the ideas around the podcast, around Carve to Flow, so the idea of togetherness, of collaboration, of building something together, of allowing multiple voices from different spaces, from different cosmologies to meet and to build something together. So we started looking into the English languages, which is a language that we share. We also talk in French, but mostly in English. And well, we couldn't find something in the English language, and maybe it says something, but and also we start thinking about the fact that, unfortunately or not, the English language is the hegemonic language of the art world, of the international relationship. And so as we were realizing that it wasn't in this language that we will find something, then we thought about the fact that we both belong to the African diaspora. I come from Benin, Otobong comes from Nigeria, and then we thought that maybe that were the places to look for a name of this project, which is also something that comes from our own background, which inform the way we work. And this idea of displacement is really much part of our both practices. So this is how we came with the name ECO, and maybe Otobong, you can explain the Ibibio meaning of the word.
So I think we looked at so many words and many things that we're thinking, like Uwem Ikad, because after you looked, Sandrine, at the words or the certain words in the language, in your language in Benin, it didn't seem to work for you. So I said, okay, let's go into Ibibio. And so I brought out this Ibibio dictionary online and we started going through words, and we narrowed down to certain words. So there was another word we really loved, which was called Uwem, which is life itself, and which embodies everything. But Iko, we kind of stopped on that one, because Iko itself is, when you talk about menye Iko, ikodo, the word, and it's also Iko, it's like voice, but Iko goes between multiple realms. So the realm of the visible, but the realm of the spirits, the realm, like it kind of transcends not just the voice itself, but it's entering into different kinds of the word, or the voice of the soil, the voice of the people, the voice of God. It's like sliding through all this regions and different so it made sense we kind of fell on that, and we decided that also the form itself of the word is short. It's short. It's an IKO, and we worked with a graphic designer that brought together the O, which becomes like the volume of the mouth, or the bubble, the speech bubble, and to kind of create something that goes beyond just an image, but something that kind of evokes a place where the voice can be expanded. And so that's how we decided on Iko itself, the word.
And I really like what you just said now about spirits and the immaterial, because in a way, like when we look at works of art, like poetry, music, literature, art in its many forms, there's spirits of conversations hidden in there. They're not going to get a credit like in the way that maybe a fabricator or producer would, but they're there, but kind of hidden. And I think what's really beautiful about this eco project, I mean, knowing you, Otto, is some of these people or figures are found in your work. Like the conversations you had with them are embedded in your work. And I think it's really generous for you to be sharing this open, these kinds of conversations open and publicly with the podcast. But on that line, there's another part of the podcast, this eco zone, where you guys are commissioning new works of art that are tied to the conversations. Can you maybe talk about how you're pairing these eco zones with the conversations, and what that process is like, and the relationship between them?
Yeah, I think with the eco zone and the podcast itself, I think this was something that we were discussing a lot, because we had a lot of conversations about how do we want to structure the podcast, and would it be only conversations, or could we also look out and see who and what would be interesting to bring together with the conversation. And so Sandrine really worked a lot on that part of the ecozone and expanded it beyond. And so we proposed different names, and she kind of looked at it from different perspectives to see what would go with what. But maybe it's good that Sandrine expands on that and how she thought about that aspect of the interconnection between the interviews I did and who would then be with the conversation, who would be next to that, or who would be in the ecozone.
Yes, about the ecozone, as you said, Otobong, we wanted the podcast to be a place of thinking as much as a place of feelings. As an artist and as a curator, the things we do, the work we do, is really much rendered visible in the art world. And the art world is a space where one access knowledges and have experiences that allows for another kind of understanding, another way of experiencing the world. And as Felwyn says in the last episode, the knowledge that is produced within the art, in the artistic production, that's happened somewhere else than in the logos. And for us, the music, the poetry, the literature, the fiction is also a way of producing, also a way of sharing ideas and knowledges that are not to be found in the theory in some other places, and that also calls to other type of senses, human senses, that allows to make sense of the things we experience and make sense of the things we see. So it was very much, the ecozone for us is very much complementary of the interviews that Otobong conducted. It's a place that comes in and allows to expand the things we have heard, allow to expand the experiences of the guest in other ways than with words, with theory, with practical experiences. And for us, it was very important to have this subjectivity experience in another way than in conversation. So it makes sense for us to have sound, music, singing that constitute another form of way of engaging with the things we experience. And so the people we have invited to be part of the ecozone, we really think of the way they could make sense with the conversation, because they're not people that are directly linked to the guest, the speakers we invited, and some of them didn't know each other. So we have to find a way of putting together this audio proposition, this music proposition with the conversation. For Adele Keto, for instance, who was in the first episode with Dr. Aisha Conte, who we both met in Senegal, the song she proposed to us was very much about displacement and how multiple localities affect the work that she do. So it makes sense to put her in the episode with Aisha, who we understand with her practice, with her work, with Nyara, her enterprise, circulates between different geographies, and these multiple geographies affect her production. For Nola Sherry, for instance, the singer who was featured in the episode with Gozi Oshonogor and Abubakar Fofana, who are both fashion designers. Nola Sherry, in her practice as a singer, but also in her daily life, she's very much concerned with the economy and ecology of the fashion, and how fashion expresses more than the culture of someone, the value, and also the belief. So it makes sense to put her in that episode with Gozi Oshonogor and Abubakar Fofana. And for instance, the contribution of Sky Arundhati Thomas, it was very much with Ashna, with the episode with Ashna Afroz Ahmed. It was, we're more thinking of the geography that connects them. Ashna Afroz is located in Bangladesh, and Sky is in India. So we were putting together those geographies together. This is pretty much how we make sense of the ecozone and the conversations.
But I think I will add to that by saying that, you know, the ecozone is a 5-minute proposal. So what we did was also to just ask people to propose something to us. That means at the end of the day, we don't know what they're going to propose, but we accept everything that they propose because that's what they can do at that moment. So within the interviews itself, when I talk to Felwyn or when we have a talk to Ashna, or there you can actually control a bit that conversation. You can delve, you can from one corner into another. But with the ecozone, you ask someone, you have 5 minutes, you can do whatever you want. You can experiment. And so in a way, at the beginning, we're a bit worried, like, what if someone proposed something that we really do not like? And we are like, oh my God, that's impossible to deal with that. And I said, but that's a proposal. The proposal is that we don't necessarily have to like it, but it is what it is at that moment. And it's something that someone has put their energy. And when you put the right energy, you know, we have different tastes. It's normal. We're human beings. But when you put the energy, there's something that we will be able to hold on to. And what we've been amazed by is that all the different propositions have been amazing. They have been really touching from different perspectives. Someone like Kechi Nomu, she was recording this during the End SARS movement in Nigeria. Someone like Sky, Arundhati Thomas, it was during the time in India when we're having all the issues going on around the person that was raped and also that was burnt, and the whole uprising in India around that. So you're seeing that the creative force within places are still possible, even under tense, even under when we're going through crisis. But there are moments that we are able to find the solace and the possibility to still create. So it was very stressful on both sides because we weren't sure if they'll be able to bring out something under that time of pressure. But I think with that pressure, it gave them maybe, you know, Sky was talking to me that it was a moment where she could really quietly write, even though everything was burning outside. In Nigeria, Kechi was saying to me, look, it's just so noisy outside. I don't know if I'll be able to record. And I was like, you know, it doesn't matter. We absorb the sound. We take everything in. So with this podcast, I think what we decided to do was not to clean out the noises, not to clean out the environment, but to incorporate, because, you know, even Ashna's piece, when you listen to Ashna Afro's, you hear the rickshaws, you hear the sound of the city also infiltrated in the recording. So we decided, and that is one clear curatorial and also artistic decision, that the work should reflect the space itself, the echoes, the little irritations you could get from the environment, to be part of the work itself.
Yeah, no, I thought that was great. No, there was so many moving parts of these episodes, but I think the one that hit me the most was the I think it was the third one with Shayla Sheikh and Felwyn Sarr, where they were talking about like whose labor and knowledge is used to make gardens, but who is also denied the pleasure of enjoying those gardens, or the idea of like the language of earth and nature, like there has to be a human translation to be able to express that. Or also Felwyn Sarr's comments about economy, like when people, you know, there's basically economies of social relations that pre-exist the language of economics as we know it today. And when you use the word informal economy, it basically makes you think that it's something that hasn't been formalized. It discounts a different form of economy that might be based on social relations, where maybe your collateral is your word or the trust that you've built out over time. Maybe there's other ways of having guarantees. So I guess for both of you, I think it would be interesting to hear about the Carved Flow Foundation and the different types of economies you're trying to bring to life and generate and grow through this process and foundation, which ECO is a part of. Could you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, maybe. Thanks for bringing that up about the informal and the notion of informal and what that language and what language does
It's really, it really made me think it's true.
Yeah, because no, I think that conversation we had with Sheila, and there's a second part to it
Yeah.
now, which is now being added today. I think that conversation with Sheila and with Felwyn was very interesting in also understanding the relationality of things and how the relationship and the building up of relationship of things, or in relation to language, how that language already puts us in a place that does not allow the full potential. And he talks also about potentiality, the full potential of something to exist. So once you're talking about informal language, you're actually reducing the potential of what that thing could be on this planet. You're relegating it into another kind of place instead of it being in a place of equality with the other. It's in a place that is second, that has to be developed, or like how we talk about developing worlds, or we talk about the develop. And meanwhile, within that, you see the cracks and even the idea of democracy that is being sold to other parts of the world that should be, and then we see within the spaces of democracy, in quote, what the cracks that are within that. So, it's very interesting to be able to look at the world from that perspective he was talking about. And, with regards to the podcast, I will come back to the foundation, but I think it's good to expand a little bit more. We were also had a big question about language, because Sandrine, you speak more French than English, and I speak English, and then there's also my language Ibibio, then there are all these other languages, and how do you find a place within a space of the podcast to be able to bring that notion of language and multiple kinds of language that also have that force and that power to be and to express emotionally, intellectually, on all levels. But I will come to the Carve to Flow itself. And I think within Carve to Flow, this is important because we've worked in different geographies, places like in Dakar, Senegal, where we had the academy, or in Nigeria, where the foundation is. Then also in different institutions where it moves through, and you're also negotiating different kinds of languages, different kinds of potentials, and also different kinds of landscapes. And one has to consider all these different landscapes and the shifts that are happening between these landscapes. So as of now, I was meant to go in April to Nigeria, because we're meant to do a workshop with with people that were working around products for skin, from making soaps to making deodorants, making soap. We met quite a number of people in Nigeria, and we're meant to do the first training, and then we had the Corona or COVID-19 pandemic situation. But I think what has happened is to shift a bit from, I was discussing with my sister, who is very much involved in looking at ways in which the foundation could move forward. So my brother and my sister were looking more closely at that, because these are the people I trust the most. And it's much easier. We've been working together as kids on different things, so it made sense. And so when this crisis started, we started thinking of other ways of doing things and connecting with other foundations, like the Dagomu Foundation in Nigeria, We ABC Foundation with my sister. She has her own company, and to see ways we can also create palliatives or to make masks and things for people that are on the ground. So that's what's been happening now in between. It's like an in-between phase before we get back to working on the land and planting and doing the things, archiving knowledges. But I think now I was talking with my brother to be able to find ways to, even if we're not in the region we want to work in, which is in Akwa Ibom, but the region where they are, to start looking and seeing what are people making, who are people that are working from local materials, and how can they construct things, and to start maybe archiving what people are doing. So these are things that we're thinking of for the next year, because it's really about archiving knowledge in a way. archiving. There's an old lady my brother was talking to me about who makes ceramics, and she's from a village that has a lot of clay, and she's in her 90s. And we're like, okay, maybe it would be good to be able to visit her and just, at least kind of archive, listen to her voice, record what she has to say, even if it's in another language you don't understand, but at least to see, photograph what she's making, if she allows us to, but yet she has to give the permission. And also to just archive knowledge, because as of now, we can't really do much on the other level, but on archiving, we can.
Yeah.
So that's where it is at this point in time. And I think like with the podcast, these are things that can enter into a place, but we don't know yet how the next phase is going. So I think with Sandrine, we will discuss this and see how we move forward after this first phase with Kunstfestival des Arts. I don't know what Sandrine wants to add to this.
No, that's good. Maybe one thing, because Diana, you were talking about garden of knowledge when you asked the question, and just to pick up on that, maybe just add in relation to Carve to Flow, but also to Otobong practice, and maybe myself also, in terms of thinking of whose guest we would invite. It was very much important for us to that the guest practices reflected our thinking process, and the idea of interdisciplinary is very much important in both our practices. So this is why, although we both operate very much in the field of the art world, it was very important to have those people who don't necessarily engage with the art world, but whose practices inform our own practices and our own reflection. And this is why we had all these people actually who maybe except Shelashek, who really works closely with artists, but also Ferwin Sarr, who's himself a musician, but others, and Abubakar Fofana, who's also a multidisciplinary artist working with fashion also. But all these people have practices that are incorporated in the art, but also elsewhere. And to have this discussion, to have this connection of different sources of knowledge is really much part of the reflection and the ideas around Carve to Flow and around Ecozone. So that was important for us to also, and we talk about that in the introduction, whether we'll talk about cultural practices or artistic practices, because it's important for us, of course, but our practice as a curator and as an artist is really much informed by other disciplines, other practices. So it's also something that participates to that garden of knowledge, where you have like different spaces working together, and how you would say, putting it, I don't remember the name in English, but se greffe en français, it's
like to graft.
Yeah, grafting each other, exactly. Yeah, that's the word. Yeah, that's what I wanted to say.
No, it's super interesting. And Otobong, I was really moved by what you were saying about working with your siblings. So thinking about diaspora experiences and what Felwine was saying about economies, like in my Pacific Islander diaspora world, property is owned by, it's matrilineal, and it's a woman and her brother, because that's a bond that you can't separate, right? Like the father of your child can come and go, your husband can come and go, but that's something that stays. And it's just interesting when you think of all these different ways of being that maybe aren't discounted or considered when you look at economics with the capital E. But when you have something like eco, and you can open up all these different ways of being that have existed since before the theory of economics, there's so much that can be generated. And maybe thinking of generating, like another word that connects both of you is the word germinating, right? Because your project at the raw material company was called Germination, no?
Mm-hmm. Yes, it was.
I really love that word, but also in this time of people being so germophobic. But, the other meaning of germ is something like, that it's a portion of an organism that's capable of developing into a new one, or part of it one, right? Like it's actually a generative term. Yes. So I guess like what's germinating with you guys right now, as a part of Carve to Flow and also this podcast?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, like with the thinking of Carve to Flow in the first place was to be able to bring different groups of people together. So, like in the first part of the first beginning of Carve to Flow, worked with Maya Tunta, worked with Evie, the botanist. We worked with different people, people from Kalamata. So that idea of bringing people together. I mean, when the idea started, it wasn't something that I knew where I was going. I had an idea that this could be something that could form in 3 phases or different phases. But I think it's through the meeting of different people that the grafting, that the work has taken form. If in Athens at the lab that you have the public events and the workshop that was curated by Maya Tunta, that I wouldn't have been able to do that. She just knew which artists to bring in relation to the contents that Carve to Flow was bringing out. Or even looking at the podcast and working with Sandrine, the propositions, it would have been a completely different thing if it was just me doing it. But she brought in also the balance within the work, brought in names of people that I wouldn't have been thinking of when I was like, I really want to hear what Felwyn has to say about this. She was like, ooh, what about Sheila Sheikh? And that's how it became like it, and it made sense. So it has been a lot of dialogue, a lot of names we've put together, and things just kind of melt into each other. And we got to realize that we were able to work together very smoothly, that there isn't any form of conflict, but more form of something that allows for things to grow. So it's a much more positive construction of the whole project. And so for me, it's something that I think I'm learning over time, how to work with people and how to accept the different ways people work. And also timing, and that's very important, time, and also and also letting go of things, letting go of certain things that you're not, and allow certain things to melt into each other and form. And so that's how it's been, the build up so far. I mean, with my sister, for example, in the last episode, this came at the last minute. We realized that Felwyn Sarr and Sheila Sheikh had a very long conversation. And we're like, oh Lord, we can't put like an hour, 30 minutes of this conversation. It's just too much and it's quite dense. So we decided that we'll break it into 2, but then we didn't have anybody for the ecozone. And I was like, oh, I've been wanting to sing with my sister or do something with my sister. So maybe I could ask her if she would like to do the 5th ecozone. And then we tried singing on Zoom and it just didn't work because we both have our voices. I would sing a kind of alto and she might sing a soprano. And when we're trying to sing, the Zoom was like, no. So at the end of the day, I just told my sister to sing and do it herself. And so that's where it ended, with my sister being a polyglot. She speaks Portuguese, French, English, and Ibibio. So she writes also poetry. And so she sang in Ibibio a song that we sing together. And then she also read out one of her poems, which has multiple languages, the flow from Portuguese to English to French too. So it's this kind of very smooth flow of languages. And I think that made sense at the end of everything because it brought the whole project together about language, of how things flow from one place to another. But it also brought it back to the place of the language, Ibibio language, where people can now understand the musicality of that, of the language itself. So the way of thinking has just been a very gradual build-up from the things that you might think is a failure or things that you might think are not working, from the noises that come into infiltrating the project, that you kind of accept them and let them have a real place within the work.
Interesting. Another word that keeps coming up constantly, and I think it's also in the address of the podcast, is this word flow.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this before, but conversation is really a part of so many of your works. And maybe this is a dumb question, but when you're working across so many different cultures and languages, what do you think are some of the key things to make, and disciplines, what are some of the key things to making conversations flow? Practical advice for the audience.
Make a conversation. Oh, well. I mean, there are moments of silence. I think there's the silences in which I don't know if the word silence is good because I don't believe in silence, let's say.
I know that.
I don't believe in nothing is silent. There's always something. I think there isn't a word to be able to describe the things that we don't hear. I think it's more or less the things we do not hear, but it's things that are still manifesting themselves and are still having a certain vocality, but we don't hear them. We're not tuned enough to hear on a specific level. So, and those things are read. I mean, like when we're having an interview, you're talking to someone, like when we're in Bangladesh, I don't speak the language. When I was in China, I don't speak the language. When I'm in Brazil, I don't speak the language. But there are things that you can sense, and there are things that you might sense falsely. But there are many ways to like work with those, what I call the silences, the things that you do not hear, and also to understand the tones, to understand try to start, but it takes time for me to start understanding a place. And a lot of times we want to accelerate that so quickly. So sometimes like being in a place for a month and a half, you start understanding the silences. When we do I think when we're doing the podcast and listening to different people talk, we all have different baggages. But I think one of the things is to let go of your own, once in a while, let go of your own baggage, to be able to have an understanding of someone else's baggage, to be able to know that this or someone else's history, to be able to know how to walk with them. And it might not be the same way you walk, but it's a way to learn to work together, a way to learn to listen together. And that takes a bit of time to navigate, but it's sometimes just letting go of ego, letting go of your pride, letting go of so many things for you to be able to see and able to listen and able to work together. And because there are many things that can actually get on your nerves, but it doesn't mean that your way is the right way. It just means that your way is different. And sometimes allowing the other way to infiltrate in your way can create an amazing surprise or another way of communicating, of making, and of incorporating and germinating. Let's use that word. It's like a germ, like you have something that is on your skin that itches, and then you itch it. And sometimes I say, do not itch, because the more you itch it, you're not listening to it. The more you itch it, the more kind of like, and sometimes you just have to calm it down, soothe it, take it, put aloe vera on it. Let it soothe and like listen to the way it's working, and slowly it gets away. So it's like, is it you're going against the skin, you're scratching it, or you're soothing it? And these are the ways of like negotiating between that place of the scratching and the place of the soothing, or the place of not even touching it and letting it be. And for me, these are ways of like trying to think through how things should, how you actually listen, communicate through languages, through borders, and through race, through, I mean, there are many levels you can put it. And it's important.
Absolutely. What about for you, Sandrine? What do you think allows a good conversation to flow? And before you start, for everyone in the audience, we have a chat box, so we'd love to have questions from you and to draw you into the conversation as well. We have about 15 more minutes.
Yeah, well, just to pick up on that, I was thinking about the idea of Sheila Sheikh talking about the more than human. So I'm trying to explain how it relates to the idea of conversation, and what you were saying, Otobong, about allowing yourself to understand how someone else is thinking, and the difference between your thinking process and someone else's thinking processes, and how you can allow an understanding from different points of view. The idea of more than human that Sheila Sheikh expresses in the last episode with Falwin, is talking about the difference between the human form, and other forms of life. And I think it really connects also to Carve to Flow and the ideas about how we relate to land, and how we encounter the land, and what relationship we build with it, in terms of understanding that there is other cosmologies, there is other forms that have their own life, that have their own way of making, of producing materials, of producing knowledges, and the way we encounter those knowledges. So for me, a conversation also in that sense, it's working when we understand, as you said, Otobong, that there's other ways of beings, and other ways of thinking, and other ways of growing into the world, that one can has to acknowledge in order to have to make a productive, not productive, but constructive conversation. So the idea of acknowledging that there is other forms of living, other forms of being human, also other forms of culture, all these differences allows for a place of understanding and building together. So for me, a conversation is also about acknowledging these different ways of being and thus thinking, I would say.
Yeah, that's interesting, Sandrine. And also when you're using the word constructive or building, another discussion Otobong and I had in a different context was about this idea of broken English, and this idea that if you speak broken English, you're actually constructing from multiple languages. You can see the world in multiple ways. So actually maybe speaking broken English, you might actually be more intelligent or have more perspectives than someone that speaks like perfect Oxford English. So maybe can you speak a bit more about, because you also play with broken English in your poetry and your work. I'd love to hear more musings on this, Otto.
Yeah, I mean, it was really super. I really enjoyed the text that is on the website of the Diasporic School on the ECO, your text that you wrote on the work in relation to language and in relation to that notion. I use the word broken because it allows for that idea of something that is fragmented. And also I think what's interesting, because I can come to like Fela Kuti, for example, Fela Anikulapo Kuti.
Yeah,
and I think that's one of the people, or one of the musicians or thinkers, I also think, and also activists that I've always found extremely powerful, and one of our early activists that would fight against the government on all levels. But he also used the power of language. He went to, he knew how to speak English perfectly well. But you have to also know that there are different audiences, there are different people that you want to talk to. There are some things you do not want to say to some other people. And I believe in places of obscurity. I believe in things that are not meant for certain people and meant for others. I believe that there are ways of using language to talk to multiple people. And we see that over histories from different groups of people that would talk to a certain group of people with language. And for me, my work is also meant for people that come from my village. That it's meant for museums, it's meant for different kinds of places, it's meant for, and so if I want to create a work that I want to touch and talk to multiple people, then I then start, even if I'm writing a poem, there's some parts of the poem that is really focusing, and also the words, or the like when I talk about eco or use the word eco, it can enter certain realms that English does not. Mm-hmm. There's certain words that in English you cannot find. And so sometimes I have to even invent words. Like, for example, fragilologist, which is...
fragilologist?
fragilologist. Fragilologist is, for me, it's the definition is the study of fragility. Like, so I'm a fragilologist. I'm a kind of scientist that studies fragility. I mean, I haven't found a word, unless you know the word, but I haven't found a word for that. So, so I will invent words for titles of works, and I will invent words for things that I feel that, that word does not exist. And it's just a way to be able to use different kinds of words, languages, to be able to express or talk to or move through different spaces, and also to blur sometimes if it's needed, to blur, to render unreadable, to render not understandable. And that is also important as a way of putting one layer back and putting another layer in front. So it's a way to deal with all those different layers and expose one at a certain time, and to heighten a place or a voice, and then shift again to another. So it creates a certain kind of flow. And the flow is through its rhythm, but it's not necessarily through its through the words itself, but it's the rhythm allows it to flow.
Beautiful. Flow again. So I guess also in terms of invented words, another invented word I love is the name of the commissioner of the Eco Project, or co-commissioner of the Eco Project, the Kunst and Festival des Arts, because it has both French and Flemish embedded in it. And I think it really carries the spirit of the city of Brussels that we love so much. But we have a question from the Kunst and Festival des Arts, which is, this is the idea is that this eco, hi Sandrine, this eco is going to be an ongoing series. So like, what's the next step for eco past this moment of the diasporic schools?
Okay, from my perspective, I think it's still something that we have to really sit down and discuss with also Sandrine. We've discussed it in bits and pieces. From my perspective, it's, for me, the way I also look at eco is like an archive. It's an archive of people we encounter and places that we encounter, materials that we encounter. And so we will, the way I think about it is that it can connect with Akwa Ibom in Athens if we're having an exhibition with different artists and doing a workshop, if there's specific people that we want to hear their voice and how they work. It can be an extension as a way to continue of archiving different narratives, different stories, and it can also connect with the foundation, but it also connects with Sandrine, her practices, the people that she wants to bring in. And it could be a combination of our worlds that we want to bring into the podcast. So these are things that we still have to for me, I feel like we still have to talk and see how we're going. And also we have the possibility to shift it in ways that we think it's necessary for the next ones to come. I don't know how you're thinking, because now we've just finished today, the 5th part of the podcast. And so we're giving it some time to now regroup, have time to look and think further for the next ones. But I don't know how you're thinking at this point in time, Sandrine.
Yeah, I think it's good to.
Oh, Sandrine, we can't hear you.
Oh, you can't hear me?
Mute, maybe?
No, I can hear.
No,
I can hear.
Can you hear me, Diana?
Can
you hear me? You can hear me, Otobong.
I can hear you, yes.
So that's strange.
I still can't.
You still can't? Am I mute on your screen?
Connection problems. So I can't wait till we can have in real life conversations. But I think this was also a creative way of using digital space in the way that you guys formulated this. Hey, Sandrine.
I'm back. Can you hear me now?
I can't hear.
That's strange.
Okay. I can hear you very well.
Yeah, only Otobong can hear me. Can you hear
That's
Otobong?
so strange.
Yes, I can hear you. Yeah.
But
Diana,
Diana,
can you hear Sandrine? Yep. Okay. It's my problem. So I can't moderate because I can't hear, but please talk.
I can
no.
summarize.
But
Yeah.
okay. Ask maybe you can ask her if she hears you. Diana, you hear Otobong?
Diana, do you hear me?
Yeah. I can hear you, Otto. I can't hear Sandrine.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
So Sandrine, if you say it, I can make
yes,
kind of
you can translate.
Could you sing it?
Oh, and everybody else can hear you, Sandrine.
Okay.
So it's just Diana.
Okay.
Lucky
So
me.
maybe I can speak and then
terrible.
you can translate to Diana what I was saying.
Okay, go ahead.
No, but just about the continuation of ECO. For me, as I see it and as you expressed it, I think we both have the desire for ECO to be a place where we can nurture the relationship that we have built with people, and also to create new relationships with people whose work and thinking are very much a part of our thinking process and activity. So yeah.
Yeah. So Sandrine said that it's for her it's important that it's a place where we can nurture the relationships we have with people, and a place where we can build also that relationship we've had with people. But I think I'd like to add to that for me it's been a great opportunity to also start building that relationship with Sandrine, because we'll be working very closely not only on the podcast but also in relation to Carve to Flow and projects that come in the future. So it's that relationship by seeing that we can do this project together and that we can really build something together and see how we work further, because it's not always obvious when you start working with someone that you think that it can continue, but at this point in time it feels really right and feels really strong and interconnected and very much symbiotic the way we work. So it's been an opportunity to start knowing the other through the way they think, through also their ethics of work, and also their engagement. And that is something the person you work with, you cannot train, or you just see it, you know it, and you feel it. And when that works, it's amazing.
Yeah, it's back to that flow of energies and the flow of conversation and the flow of trust.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Yeah.
Excellent. So I guess the ECO is up. Everyone should listen to it. I guess now that we in Brussels at least, or in Belgium, like part of our only freedom is walks. It's great to listen to while walking, and also to try to connect to land and to nature. So I hope everyone can go outside. And yeah, thank you so much to the Kunsten Festival des Arts and to you and all your collaborators for this absolutely beautiful project. And I hope it gives everyone more things to converse about while at home.
Yeah, thank you so much. And if you want to, our website is the website is www.ecoflow.com. So that's where you'll find the podcast, and also on the Diasporic Schools of Kunsten Festival des Arts, you'll be able to also read and see all the different, and also listen to all the different episodes, and everything is on now. So yay. So
yay. And so now you can take a quick break. There's going to be the final portion of the Diasporic Schools public program, which is going to start at 7:30. So come back to this link in about 25 minutes.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Diana.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Festival des Arts, for the invitation.
Yeah, thank you too for the invitation. And thank you for moderating. It was really cool.
Great to you both. I wish it were in person, but
yeah.
One day.
Yeah, one day.
We should make it in Japan, I think.